Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. In this video I want to talk about scenario objectives and whether they're the answer to balancing Warhammer the Old World.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems, and offer custom items to suit your club, your event, or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
Right off the bat, I'm going to say, no, of course they're not. You can't balance Warhammer the Old World, in my opinion. It's a behemoth of a game that still bears resemblance of so many editions and is not really designed to be a fully balanced competitive experience. But we do like to play our games of Warhammer that way, or many of us do, unless you're playing a narrative scenario and having a really laid back game, whether it be an event or whether it be at your local club. When we play points matched games, we like the idea that both sides have an equal opportunity to win, and it's arguable at the moment that there are some issues in the game, and there have been in every single edition, but there are some issues in the game which means we're not seeing too many blocks of inventory, that maybe dragons are too powerful, and yes, there are answers for all of those things, but ultimately it's fairly widely reported that at events, games of Warhammer the Old World don't really look like games of Warhammer the Old World in the pictures. If you've got 3 dragons in one single army, that's fun for a tryout for a game, but if that's the standard way of operating and you're not seeing blocks and blocks of inventory, it definitely doesn't represent the pictures that are inside the book, and I've discussed that before on videos as well. And I think that objectives could well be the answer to that, and it may well be something we're likely to see more of in the future. So I talk about this now. It was not been that long ago since I made a video talking to camera like this, talking about game balance and whether it is important or not. And there's definitely many of the same topics and themes that will overlap with this video, but I really want to focus very much on objectives and objective play within the scenarios for Warhammer the Old World, and how I think that can have a positive impact and maybe why we might see it. Now, that doesn't come just from me. Very recently, Games Workshop put out 3 scenarios as part of the Warhammer World weekend, and my last video talking to camera like this was all about the 500 point format that was in one of those scenarios. This is taking inspiration from some of the elements of the other 2, but also the wider conversation that appears to be going on at the moment on other channels talking about this. We've had recent events with scenario objectives in them. We've got an upcoming one as well, and I will mention those and talk about that in this video as well. And what am I talking about with scenario objectives? Warhammer for a long time, in fact across most of the editions, has been mostly, but not always, focused around earning victory points from killing other units, generals, capturing banners, that kind of thing. Yes, there are different setups and layouts and deployments, and sometimes different missions, and occasionally capturing an objective is part of it as well, or maybe a table quarter or something like that. But overall, the game is won or lost by the amount of stuff you kill, and that's core to Warhammer. And actually, I'll say right up front, I don't want that to change and go away, and any championing of scenario objectives in this video, I'd like to see that as addition to what we already have, because I think it will bring an extra element of balance. But if we take a little look back at some of the scenarios that we've had in the past, you'll see that the game has changed a little bit over the years, while the core remains very much a victory point kill based thing. So I'm not going to cover all of the previous editions in any kind of detail at all, but let's go back in time and take a little look at some of the things we've seen before in previous editions. In the first 4 editions, there wasn't really an awful lot in the way of set scenarios, and if we go back to 5th edition, you find 10 battle scenarios listed, a wide range. We've got pitch battle, secret dispositions, meeting engagement, surprise attack, flank attack, ambush, last stand, breakthrough, treasure hunt, and then tournament battle, which gives us a lot more restrictive ideas around balancing the game for matched play as it was back then. And it was quite restrictive. No unridden large monsters, no allies, no special characters, no more than 1 war machine chosen for each regiment of troops. not too bad at all, but definitely an attempt of balancing there. Wizards are limited to a maximum magic level of 3, and limit on magic points as well. Irrelevant really in this conversation because we're talking about scenario objectives, but I'm trying to build a picture of around the game has slightly changed over the years. It's not always just been straight up victory points, and there's definitely been restrictions and an idea around making the game more balanced if you're playing in a matched play setting. We see very much the same with 6th edition, a list of scenarios with different historical names, but the core 6 scenarios or core 5 scenarios that are really rolled up for are pitch battle, breakthrough, meeting engagement, flanking force and capture. And essentially they're deployment maps. They are ways of setting up your game and timings for bringing troops on the table in order to achieve those victory points from killing other things. It's only really capture that has an objective in there. And I remember days of playing Warhammer in the past where people would ignore the funky scenario with the objective in at the end. And I think that's important to remember. The essence of what players want with Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer the Old World is kill points, and I don't think they should really be removed. But I also think it's probably time for a little bit of a change and see the benefits for adding some objectives in there and other ways to score points, which will force people to think differently about the way they write their army lists. The 7th edition rulebook, which in many ways actually might be my favourite, doubles down even more on that victory point game. You've got the victory chart front and centre, and that really is the way you decide who is the winner. We have a reduction really in scenarios. It says playing the game quite early on. It shows you very much the standard battle line style deployment, and the scenarios provided in the book are much smaller. There's only really 3 in there, and I know there were more afterwards, but it's very much based around those kill team things, and I think they're good. And like I've already said, they are important, but I think it's time to maybe have a look at a change. And for completists, let's have a little look at 8th edition. We have Battle Line, we have Dawn Attack, Battle for the Pass, Blood and Glory, Meeting Engagement, and Watchtower. And I remember Watchtower also being a little bit controversial at the time because some units could fit in the Watchtower and others couldn't, and many events changed that to a hill, which I think was a better solution. And again, I suppose maybe that shows why the community in some ways is a little bit reticent to accept objectives as a way of determining battle winner, because they look at scenarios like Watchtower. Remember it being a scenario that many events just didn't run because it was a little bit janky and caused some balance issues maybe. So we have to be careful that if we're introducing these kind of scenario objectives that we get it right and it doesn't dominate the battlefield in a negative way, that it gives all kinds of army lists a chance to win. And that was very much a whistle-stop tour. I didn't discuss editions 1 to 3, and I think the game, probably its 4th edition format onwards, was the game we're playing today in essence. I think it was a little bit different prior to that, and there are examples of people making their own scenarios. There's probably scenarios I've missed. There were other publications with scenarios in, and we're not talking about the narrative scenarios here. I'm a narrative player at heart. I'm a laid-back player at heart, and that's great. But I do find it really interesting about how the community interacts around game balance. Not because I go to loads of events, though I do like to go to a few. Also, as I've said before in other videos, it trickles down to club play. People play comp packs at clubs. People copy those kind of events. And if you're playing someone you don't know very well at a club and you're arranging your game in a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group by messaging or something like that, it's very easy to say, I want to run this comp pack, and it stops that horrible mismatch when someone turns up with a really fluffy, lovely laid-back army and someone's got 3 dragons, because one person's not going to have a very good time and the other person may not get a game again, depending on the makeup of that gaming group. It's hard. We all like to game in different ways. There's no right or wrong way, and it's silly to get into those arguments. And this is why I find this whole thing interesting. And I suppose we should touch very briefly on what we have now with Warhammer the Old World. We have 6 scenarios that are very reminiscent of those in the past, and they all have victory points as a winning condition to one extent to another, some slightly different from others. Open battle is just what it is, and I think it should very much be part of the game. Breakpoint is slightly different, and it was interesting to see that in this set of rules. Those players who are familiar with Middle-earth strategy battle game will be familiar with the breakpoint element of deciding who wins the game. And I don't know whether this is popular or not within the community and events. I just don't go to enough of them at the moment, so I'll be interested. But I quite like that this is different, and it brings an element before victory points. Victory points are still there as a secondary, but breakpoint is interesting. And I think if people know they're going to be playing games like this, it maybe gets people thinking about their army list construction and how that might be important to have a wide, varied, balanced army list, just in case they come against different kinds of armies, but also different kinds of objectives in their scenario play. But as we move on, we are very much back to that deployment style thing with flank attack. The victory conditions are victory points. Meeting engagement, again, the victory conditions are victory points. And mountain pass, again, the end-to-end deployment, very, very interesting at times, sometimes really annoying, but again, the victory points are the winning condition. And command and control, which is the modern day version of Watchtower. We do have an objective in the centre. We have a terrain piece in which to capture. Again, I like that. I think that adding those kind of things add a different variance to the game, but you have to make sure that you add those, I believe, in a way that affects people's list writing choices. Otherwise, people will just skip the one janky one, and you need enough of these kind of things to really add to the mix so that victory points is there and really strongly present, but not the only thing we see. And we look at those new scenarios that were given to us free on Warcom the other day, and we see a little bit of an element of that kind of thing in those new ones as well. The Seize the Tower scenario, which I discussed in my previous video, does very much have a central objective there. It's a tower, it's a watchtower. We've kind of discussed those things already. But upon Shrouded Shores does have objective markers, which is a little bit different in the way it's handled here, and the kind of thing that I really think could help unlock a different style of list design, or at least try to force that a little bit. And yes, you can argue about the placement in this scenario isn't exactly balanced, but these are narrative scenarios, so I'm not going to look at the whole scenario. I'm looking at these controlling objective markers and how that might work. And you need a core unit to capture them. You need to have a unit strength of at least 10 or more to be able to capture them and score victory points. And I think that's really useful and really important, because if you've got no inventory in your army and you've got 3 dragons, and hopefully your dragons shouldn't be able to score these kind of objectives. And I think that hopefully will drive a little bit of balance into list design again, if we see these kind of objective scenarios fairly widespread across event games and even club games, because it might drive people to balance their lists a little bit more. And that's the essence of it, really. It's not about removing victory points. They exist in that scenario as well. Those kill victory points that we all love, and I love as well, should remain a big part of the game. But I think by introducing objectives in some of the scenarios, not just 1 out of 6 or something, maybe there's a 50-50 chance that you will come up at an event and come up against a scenario where you need to capture objectives, and they should be evenly placed and they should be easy to score. They shouldn't be swung one way or the other. So none of the narrative based ideas, but if you have those kind of things on your tabletop that you need to capture that offer a significant enough amount of victory points to make it worthwhile. If it's just keep having 3 dragons, and I know I keep using 3 dragons as an example because it's an extreme one, it's an easy one for people to get their head around, but if having 3 dragons just means you can kill everything and still win and those objectives become useless, then the balance isn't right there. You need to earn enough victory points from those that it becomes worthwhile for people to take blocks of inventory, because they need them to sit on those objectives and be hard to move, and you get tactical play, you get that movement back into the game. And so much of the game design is based around inventory blocks and movement, and we just haven't seen that as the game's developed, because metas change the way metas change, and people build the lists that will do the most damage and win the most kill points and win the games. And that was encouraging to see that there, and I really hope that that's what we're going to see if we see a matched play guide or whatever it's called coming in the future. I'm quite hopeful that that's the kind of thing we might see. So let's explore that a little bit further. There's going to be a healthy mix of what we could have wish listing, but also give you a little bit of an idea by looking at these things. This is the Middle-earth strategy battle game match play guide, which I've waved around on videos before and used a bit of an example. There's also this as well. This came as a bit of a pack, and all the match play scenarios on cool little cards. I don't know if they're going to produce these things. It's the same size as the business, it's SDS, it's different writers, and they tend to vary from game systems quite a bit. Same product manager, so there will be some ideas, people that are familiar with these things and have used these things that are producing a match play guide if it comes in whatever format it comes. Maybe it'll be a free PDF for us to download and just use. It might not be something we have to purchase, but the content may be similar. So I thought it'd be fun to look at a few examples of what's in there, and maybe it will give us some of the ideas around what we could see in the future. Now, I'm not going to go through all these scenarios. There'll be no point. It's for a different game system completely. Yes, there are lots of objective-based scenarios in these as well. But again, because that matches the game system as it was, it is a different game. But it does give us an idea of the sort of the thought process and how a publication like this could become the sort of the backbone of the way competitive and matched play in a more casual setting at your club works for Warhammer the Old World. There's 18 scenarios here, not just the 6 you'd find in a standard rulebook, and that was fairly similar for Middle-earth strategy battle game as well, so there are parallels there. There's doubles scenarios as well, specific doubles scenarios, and maybe with Warhammer the Old World we could see a book like this that actually has a few narrative ones or doubles ones in there as well, as those aimed at more sort of tournament-based or club-based matched play. There's even a little bit of chatter around how you would work a tournament in terms of Swiss pairings and pairing up players and doing results and all of those kind of things, which is a nice little touch. People who run events already don't need those, but if you're new to running events and you pick this up, it could be a cool idea. And they also have the scenario pool system, which is really, really interesting. It breaks the scenarios down into 6 pools, so it gives them scenario types, so to speak. So for Middle Earth, there's Maelstrom, object scenarios where you're collecting an object or something like that, maneuvering, holding grounds or holding scenarios, kill the enemy scenarios, and then unique ones, things are a little bit different. It puts them in pools, and you could roll from your pool first and then roll for the scenario. And I think that's really interesting. You could go to a Middle-earth event, 5 rounds, and you've got to write a list that could deal with any of those 18. Now you'll have a bit of an idea. If they're using the pool system, you're going to play one Maelstrom style game and one objective style game and one kill points. And again, this will be different for Warhammer the Old World, and I'm not suggesting you need 18. It might just be 6 more scenarios that mix in some of those objective style things, and there's 12 and there's less pools. But you're going to an event and there's a good chance that 2 or maybe 3 games out of the 5 you play, you're going to have units of infantry or something that can hold those kind of objectives alongside all the other things. And I really think that's going to have a positive impact on list design and really change the meta up, and maybe we will see more and more of these. At the moment, undesirable core tax kind of units and choices coming back to the tabletop, and that's why I'm so excited about the benefits of objective play. They're not the only way of changing the game, of course. If the edition changes and there's some rules changes that makes inventory better and rid of monsters not quite so good, that will have a change. But those aren't the only 2 things in the game that people can play about. But I think that by using objectives in this way, bringing them into the game, making them powerful enough that you can score victory points by sticking your block of normal troops on there. Yes, it will cause problems. Yes, at events that will allow 120 goblins in a unit, yes, you can stick that on an objective. There are issues as well. I realise there's always a cause and effect. There's always a knock-on. But in a way of mixing things up and bringing that to the table, I think, I hope that it would force people to write more balanced lists with inventory in them, knowing that they need them to score in certain scenarios. And if you do just bring that 3 dragon list, sorry for mentioning it again, but if you do just bring that, there's likelihood 2 or 3 scenarios you're just not going to be able to score. And you can go around killing things, but if people are able to avoid your dragons or hold those objectives long enough, they can still win the game. And I think it could be a really fun way. And I hope that that's what we see, whether we purchase it, because I would buy it if it came out, whether it's something that's produced as a PDF. I hope that that's the kind of thing we see. And you can change the game. You can really change the whole outlook of the game by doing that without having to change the core rules. And at heart, the core rules work. If you're a narrative laid-back player and you're playing with your friend in your garage and you have a conversation before the game and say, well, I want to bring a dragon, can you write a list that can take it on? Then you do it. I want to bring 3 dragons, but let's play 6,000 points and have a big laid-back game, beer and pretzels. That's great. But it's when you meet that player at the club you don't know. It's when you go to an event and there's a real mismatch. That's what you want to level out a little bit. And there's all this talk about comp and what should be done, and comp's always been a thing, and events will always do it, and you'll see different comp packs all over. And this is a little bit of a repeat of what I've said before in that previous video, but I think you can control it the other way, and by changing just that dominance of pure victory kill point type battle line scenarios and adding in just the elements of objectives that you can win enough victory points from, I think that's a positive way of not drastically changing the main core rules, not drastically changing the way the feel of the game is. You're still going to get victory points for killing things, but add another element and another way of doing it and really bring the viability of some of those less desirable units back into the game. And a final point to finish off there, but we're starting to see these kind of things already. I think the Welsh Open a couple of months back had some objective scenarios in there as well, and Dawi Altador talks about it on his channel quite positively, actually, about how it can really add a different element to the game. Don't get me wrong, I think there were lots of crazy lists still going to that kind of event, and I think maybe that's a lesson here. You've got to have those scenarios doing enough of the heavy lifting to force people to take things to score them. But there are others as well. From the Pashhammer channel, recently there's a discussion on there between himself and Chris Cousins of the Dwellers Below, an event they're doing, I think, a Dragon's Grudge in Scotland that's coming up soon. I'll put a link to the pack in the video description if I remember. They've added lots of comp, actually, light comp, but lots of comp to the arm list, but also, again, some objective scenarios to really kind of change the way people are thinking about writing lists. So that's two-sided there, and I don't think that that's a bad thing either. I'm not saying comp shouldn't exist, but again, I repeat myself, but this is a video championing the idea of victory point based objectives on the table as a viable thing to get people taking inventory to score those objectives and maybe mix things up a little bit. But that's it. Stuart, TED Talk over. It's just my opinion. I play very casually anyway. I'm really interested in your opinions in the comments below, so please do put them, whether you agree with me or not. I really like to see what everyone thinks about it. I know there will be a lot of people who really don't like the idea and love the sanctity of those victory points thing. And like I said, I want them to stay at the same time. I don't want to see scenarios which just objectives, really. In a narrative setting, yes, but not in a match play setting. I think you need a good mix to try and capture as many different types of list design as possible and even them all out a little bit. But do put your comments below. If you liked the video or at least enjoyed listening to it, please do give it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. There's loads of old world content on there. A bit of stuff like this, talking to camera, loads of hobby stuff as well, loads of painting stuff. I cover a wide reach of different topics and things, or I try to on the channel anyway, and lots of other stuff for other game systems. So do check it out if you have clicked on the channel for this video. If you do enjoy my videos on the channel and like to support me to be able to continue to make videos like this, please do check out my Patreon. It really is very important and it helps me continue to make videos like this. It takes a lot of time to record and edit and videos, especially when it comes to painting tutorials and things, and that really is the best way you can support me if you are able to do so. There are other links in the video description as well, affiliate links, that kind of thing, so it's also worth checking those out. But thank you very much for watching, take care, and I'll catch you soon.